Kathy here from Eclectic Images. Thank you for joining me. Now today's class is going to focus on using different materials together. So we're going to be using acrylic paints and then use inks. We're going to combine stamping and stenciling. So it's focusing on looking at your materials that you've got to work with, your different mediums, your different ways of applying colour, and seeing what you can use together, because it opens up whole new realms if you start combining some of your different materials without even, I guess it's touching on mixed media, but we're not really adding in anything three-dimensional. It's still going to be a flat card, but we're just mixing it up a little bit. Okay, let's see how we go. So our stamps today is the flower border and the winter branch, so two of our very popular stamps. Also going to be using a couple of stencils, and I've got here the a girl stamp, a girl with a, actually not sure what her title is, a little girl stamp from Scrapbooking'n'Craft, and also the Eclectic Images circle stamp set. Our circle stencil set. Our ink pads, we've got some Catherine Pooler, we've got Midnight, and Cove Blue and Juniper Mist, which I often love to use those two. The paints we're going to be using is the Mont acrylic paints in the pastel colours, which are just gorgeous. Lawrence is just kind of panning along those colours there. They are just wonderful. So let's get those out and start creating. Okay. So I've picked out a couple of colours that I want to use. I'm going to add them onto a palette. So I've got a little palette here, and then we can mix from there. So I've got pastel hot pink, and you don't need to use much. These are a 36ml tube, so there's quite a bit in them, and you're not using a lot, so you get so much out of the colours. We're also going to add in some pastel cantaloupe. And for the lower part of the card, I'm going to combine some eggshell blue with a bit of the mint green. Now the eggshell blue and the mint green are two colours I've used a bit when we were doing some album covers last year, some journal covers. They're just gorgeous, they work together beautifully. But how lovely is that range of colours? I think everybody needs to have these in their collection. Anyway, put those to one side. Let's start doing some painting. So with a wet brush, I'm going to create a bit of a wash on my card. So we're just going to wash some water on, pick up some of that colour, and just smooth it on. A bit too much water and getting bubbles there. Let's add some of the pastel pink. Now it is very soft, it's pastel colours, and I'm washing them out a lot, but that's the look I'm going for. Let's put some blue in next. And if it comes on a little bit much, I can always take a bit of paint off, wash my brush out, and add a little bit more water. I could add a bit more of the pink and wash that down into the blue. I'm looking for a little bit of a scenic wash, but it's not a particular, this has to be a sunset. It's just putting some colour on, but in a little bit of the colours that you might see in a scene. So a bit of ground colours, a bit of sky colours. But I don't mind if they wash into each other quite randomly. Just washing the colour out of the brush so I can just come in and just soften some of those edges. Okay, so look, it's very, very soft, which is why I chose the pastel colours, because they're not going to be putting on loads more intensity to what I want. And we just let that dry. Then we can start adding stuff over the top of it. So for the moment, I'm putting that to one side because I do have one that I prepared earlier. We'll use our paper towel just to clean up our mess here. Now, of course, I've got paint left over on my palette, so not today, but no, not in today's video, but I would actually probably wash that and several more backgrounds with those. I might do some pouncing with them and get some stronger colour on. Yes, I wouldn't let those go to waste. Right, so on our card that we've already done, so if I show that, you can see those colours blended in together. We're going to add a little bit of colour. I'm just flattening that card out a little bit. We're going to add, using our circle stencil, we're going to create our moon. But I want to add a little bit extra texture to the moon. But I'm going to sneak our little girl stencil. So when you buy the stencil, you get the girl and the cutout part. So I'm using this part as a mask. So I'm just going to mask there while I'm adding this extra bit of colour. And I want to be off centre a little bit. Okay, so picking up more of a round-ended brush, but again, having it fairly wet, I'm going to grab some of the cantaloupe. Now, when I did my sample one of this card, I actually thought, oh, it's not showing up much, and added more, and I didn't need to. You actually don't need a whole lot. So we're just dabbing on just a little bit of extra colour in there. I'll grab a little bit of the pink, wash it out a lot. If I need to, I can tap it on my stencil first, just make sure that I haven't got too much colour. And then I'm going to use my paper towel and actually dry that off a bit. Now I can lift my stencil off and have a look at how I've gone. And I can see I've just got that gentle amount of colour. I don't want any more than that. So take our little girl out. Okay, I am going to go over that with a heat gun because I want that dry before we move on. I'll put my paint palette out of the way now. If I wasn't happy with it, I could always come back in and add a little bit more colour, but I think that'll be plenty. So now we start coming in with our inks. Okay, so now we bring in the other part of the mask, of the stencil set. I'm going to pop that on there, and then I'm going to use my Cove blue to shade around it. So using a number 10 brush, so these are the brushes with the lovely round end, picking up a little bit of blue, starting off on the mask because I don't want to go straight onto the card and get a blob of colour. So I start the brush moving on the mask. Once I've got less colour on the brush, I can take it out a little bit further. And then just to make it easy for you guys to see, as well as make it easier for my hands to move, I'm just going to turn the card around and just double check that I've still got that in the same place as I want it. I haven't shifted it at all. Which means sometimes moving it around a bit just to check those edges. And then a little bit more colour, again, onto the mask and shade around it. This is one thing I love about this stencil set that we designed for Eclectic Images, because I like doing moons quite a lot and suns, as well as just sometimes basic geometric shapes. That having the stencil and the mask means you get a lot more out of the set. So let's move that out of the way. And so now you can see that this has got just that little bit more texture than the background. That's why we added that extra little bit of colour in there. If I wanted more, I could certainly put this back over the top and add a little bit more of the paint, but I like that. I've just got a little bit of wafting over there, which is great. Now we're going to add in our stenciling of our little girl. So whereas before we used the mask, now we're going to come in with the little girl herself. So positioning her in there. And here I'm going to use I might start with a bit of Cove blue and then go into Juniper mist. So we'll start with our lighter blue brush. And here we can be quite strong. Did you think I was going to be subtle? Yeah, no. Now we're going to go in, we want this to be quite a deep image. Now I'm going to change brushes to my darker blue brush, pick up the Juniper mist colour, and shade the other side of her in the darker shade of blue. just supporting the stencil a bit further down. You may notice I'm having to work this pad a little bit more. It does need a bit of a re-ink. That's one of the signs that your pad needs a bit of re-ink, is that I'm going to different areas on the pad to pick up colour to get enough colour. Whereas the Cove Blue that's recently been re-inked, I was getting colour off that very easily. So yes, this little ink pad will get a re-ink after today's session. Now if you want to check it, you can always take the stencil away and bring it back again. I'm quite happy with that. Okay, now we're going to use those same ink pads for some stamping, so I'll leave them out at the moment. And we're going to do the winter branch first. And I'm just going to grab my notepad and put that in underneath my scratch pad, just to catch, because we're going to be stamping over the edges. So I'll put those ink pads out in front. We'll pop our scratch pad there. So I'm going to stamp the winter branch a couple of times. We're going to do it first with the Cove Blue, and I'll do it second generation because I want some soft branches in there. So we stamp it onto our scratch pad once, and then we can bring it in. On my sample one that I did, my test one, I actually brought the branches in too close to her, and then I couldn't see the sparkles that were coming off her hands as well. So I'm going to keep these a bit further out this time, so we've got a bit more space to play with later. So that gives us a lovely soft branch. Let's do one on the other side as well. So ink it up, stamp once off on our scratch pad, and then come in. Now we might do one full strength with the Cove Blue. So let's bring that in, and we'll take it a little bit further back. So we're going to be deepening the card off as we go to our outer edges. And in fact, I don't think I'll put the Juniper Mist in here. I think we'll go straight to a black from here. So let's bring that one down and out a bit. Nice. Now this is working well. I overdid it a bit on the last one. I did what Joe Rice would call creating a pizza. So this time we're a bit more subtle. And in fact, I'm changing my mind a bit from my other layout. I'm actually not going to add the black in the branches. We'll just add the black as some shading. So let's clean our stamp off. Now I'm going to still use a little bit of the flower border stamp. So I'll just grab this one. Of course, mine's decided to go AWOL just because I wanted to use it today. Which is usually my smaller stamps that run away, but today it was a big one. So I get a free stamp. Well, not really. I paid to have it made, but you know. Sort of a free stamp. Okay, let's go back to, so we're covering up the Juniper Mist at the moment. We're going back to the Cove Blue, and I'll do the same as I did with the branches. We just want to add a little bit of flowers around it. Now I'm just going to, because it's a new stamp too, just give it a stamp a couple of times, just to condition it a bit. Okay, so let's ink it up. Stamp once off on a scratch pad, and then bring some little flowers in around her. Now we can ink up the same stamps, the same end of the stamp. This time go first generation and a little bit further away from the center of the card. Nice. Okay, we will ink up the other end of the stamp. Always be careful you're not inking your fingers, or make sure you wipe them off before you go to touch your card. So let's pop those flowers in. And then we'll ink again. There's a few not stamped brilliantly there, but because it was second generation, that's fine, because we're going to put the first generation ones over the top of that bit. Okay, so that's our basic little scene. Now we'll add some shading into it, and this is where we will bring in the Juniper mist. Now, if I was to do any stamping, and also too when I do some shading in the black, I'm going to stick with the Catherine Pooler, because we've added the acrylic paint in the background. It gives a little bit more of a non-porous surface to the card, so something like your VersaFine clear inks won't dry on it. You'd have to emboss them. So because we want our inks to just dry without embossing, we'll stick with the Catherine Poolers. So let's grab our Juniper mist and our dark blue brush and start adding some shading around the card. Now where I want it a bit softer, I can do just some circles till it blends into the card. But when I'm wanting to get a bit more ink on, I can just scruff it. Always make sure when you're doing this that your brush is pointing off the card. If you start scruffing like this, you'll end up with great big smudges of ink. Let's just do some circles just to blend that out a bit. And I turn my card around so that I'm always working at an angle that's comfortable for me. I don't want to be working around this way. It'll become too awkward, and again, I'll get blobs of ink on the card. So make sure that brush is facing away from you and away from the card. Just do a little bit of circles across the top there. And a gentle smudge right on the edge. Okay. So very cool to be combining inks, paints, stencils, stamps, and just seeing what can happen. Now, let's make it a bit more dramatic with some of the Midnight. So I'll grab my black brush and the Midnight. Make sure I haven't accidentally got any on my fingers while I'm doing that. I would hate to put some black fingerprints in the middle of the card. I'm mainly going to be focusing this on the corners and the outer edges, the side edges. So quite heavy on the corners and then fading into the card a little bit. Just a little bit of soft stuff across the top there, and then again concentrate it once I get to the other corner. By darkening those edges, it actually brings the focus into the inner part of the card. Now we need to make her look a little bit more interesting, so we're going to add in some white gel pen. Just give it a run on my paper and make sure it's working. And I'm looking at, again, I'm just going to clean my fingers off so I've got no ink on the hand that's going to be holding down the card. And I'm looking for, here's our moon, so our light source is hitting her face and her body from that angle. So the areas that are going to be highlighted is bits of her face that are facing up to the moon, top of her hand, her shoulder. We could even add a few little highlights in her hair, where the moonlight might be picking out her hair a little bit. Can actually bring her shoulder over a little bit. And I often find with something like this where the ink's dark that I do then go over those lines a bit, because often the white sinks into, because the ink is a water soluble one, the white sort of blending with it a bit. So just adding a little bit more there. We could also add some highlights along some of the branches and the flowers if we wanted to. Particularly, I'll just grab a few bits of the branches. Now I could also be doing this with a bit of glitter, but I want to save the glitter to be some sparkle coming from her hands. Now adding a little bit of white to the flowers will be really effective. So I'm adding some white dots for the flower centres. And then just some highlights on some of the petals. Again, thinking about the petals that are most being hit by the moonlight. Okay, now our last step for this one is to bring in some of the Kindy Glitz silver and add some silver sparkles coming from her hands, like she's offering some magic up to the moon. So just make sure I've got that running, and it is. So I want different sized dots of sparkle. So some bigger, some smaller, and I want it to be a random. I don't want a straight line, I want a random pattern to the sparkles. We need a few more down closer to her hand. There we go. That's our pump kicking in. Just decides to make noises every now and again. Okay, now silver Kindy Glitz is just beautiful. It's great for adding highlights. As I said, I could certainly use that to add highlights to the flowers, but I wanted to focus it just on the sparkles coming from the moon. So I'm going to move this card down onto my black tablecloth, just so you'll see what it's like once it's mounted up on black. So Lawrence will just follow that down there. And you can start to see how that little scene's played out. So how lovely is that, adding in those paints with the shading from the inks as well. And just a little highlights on the girl, it just gives her that little bit of movement. So, quite a sweet little card, I rather like that. And just fun to explore adding those different mediums together and just seeing what results you can get. So what I've done with the video that we put up last year, where I was using those same pastel colours on a album cover, you can use them quite just not diluted at all and use them quite strongly and get great coverage. Or you can do something like this where we've washed them right out. But just keep in mind that, as I said, it is more of a an opaque surface, it's so that then that affects what inks you can use on it. The Catherine Poolers, those inks they're fine with glossy surfaces as well as absorbent surfaces, so they can go on anything. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of a journey. I've had a lot of fun, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.